Hello, everybody, and welcome to Books in the World. We have another great episode, an interesting book. I think you're going to really enjoy getting to know Ann Barry-Jolis. Hello, Ann.
Hello
welcome
there.
for coming.
Thank you.
You are participating in improving people's lives, and I think that is just such a nice mission, and I know that you're going to enjoy telling us about your book, Grace Trail. Find your footing and move toward the life you were meant to live. Promises a lot, and I think gives people what they need. I just wanted to read some of the quotes from your cover, because you have some endorsements from people that are fairly well known, and I think that's a lovely achievement. Now, this one is from Loretta LaRoche. Readers of Grace Trail will learn to face life with hope and resiliency with this compassionate and lighthearted book. Loretta is somebody that I have seen in person a few times. She is a funny lady.
She's awesome. She's actually a very good friend of mine, and
is she?
Yeah, she and I, we do workshops together, and I think we're going to do one on living your life with grace and humor in the fall.
Yeah.
So that will be on my website. But Loretta is a hoot.
She
is just
absolutely
wonderful. She's able to take all the experiences of her life and, I don't know, just see the absurdity in it all, and sort of turn it back around so you sort of like are laughing. But she really talks about stress management. So she's awesome. She's wonderful.
I've seen people almost crying, actually crying, laughing.
Yeah.
And the other great company that you're in is Jack Canfield. He created the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, I think. And he says, if you are looking for an easy to read, and easy to implement book that will truly make a difference in your life, Grace Trail is a must-read book. It is compassionate, humorous, warm, and most of all, inspiring. I think that does set the stage for what we would like to talk about today. And
can I just say one thing to you?
You can.
There's nothing more fun to an author than to see a book with all those all those sticky notes. That means she read it.
I read it, and
she liked some of it.
I have things that I want to remind myself that I should do to make.
Do you know how many notes I get, though? I get emails that say, I sticky noted it the first time, I highlighted it the second time, and I go back to things that make a difference. So that brings joy to my heart. I love to see the stickies.
I just flopped this open to one of my stickies, and I think this is a really probably good way to start.
Okay.
Grace Trail provides access to your inner wisdom in a simple, honest way that is easy to remember, understand, and use.
Yep.
Don't complicate
Nope.
it. Don't overanalyze it.
Yep.
Just walk it, talk it, ask it, and listen. You may not get through all the questions, but the important thing is to just start.
Yep.
I didn't really plan that, but the important thing is just to start. So why don't we start?
Yeah, it's a great place to start. It's funny. Now I say I'm working on a kit for people to be able to create their own Grace Trail anywhere. And I was sharing with you that I just made a goal last week that I would like to have 50 trails in 50 states. And so in 2018. So I'm making a kit, and I'm going to sell a kit and market a kit that is basically create your own Grace Trail. And I'd love schools, hospitals, healing gardens, addiction centers, grieving groups to buy this, and they'll be able to do from soup to nuts how to set up their own Grace Trail. And it is so simple and easy to use.
Well, before we go and describe exactly what the trail is, and I actually have a picture of the one that you created in Plymouth, and we'll ask the cameras to get that going for us.
Okay.
But tell us how you developed this notion, this formula, this lovely series of reminders, questions that help put your life together. Just go.
Well, in 2000, I had children, and at that point my family really hit some real stumbling blocks. And both my parents had just passed away within 6 months of each other, and I have 5 siblings, and all of us assisted them in passing, and that was very, very difficult, as you can imagine. I had two teenagers, which is challenging in itself. And then I was going back to school to become a life coach, which I did in 2000. But all those things together, alone are hard, but together they just knocked me off my feet. And I like to say I sort of lost the bounce in my step. And I found myself in my kitchen saying, I need to step into a state of grace. I didn't even know what I meant by that. I don't recall ever using that term before. But I just knew where I was really hard, and I almost felt like there was this quiet spot next to me, but I couldn't find my way there. I felt like it was like the eye of the storm. How do I get there? And later that day, I saw 5 words within the word grace, and they are gratitude, release, accept, challenge, and embrace. And I started asking the 5 questions that flow from those 5 words. So back then, the question would sound like, oh my God, even though today is so hard, what can I be grateful for? And then I would ask the question, and what do I need to release to move forward? And the next question would be, what's calling out for acceptance? Because back then there were so many difficult things to accept. And the next question is, how would I like to challenge myself to move forward? And the last one, of course, is the most wonderful of all. You get to invite your imagination when you ask yourself, what can I embrace as possible in my precious life?
So you said these thoughts came to you in the words that go with the letters of the word grace.
Yes.
And it's a very interesting concept because grace in the traditional Christian sense is something that you get. You can't get it by asking for it. It comes to you. So this came to you, and also, but you were in training. You must have had psychology courses.
You mean as a life coach?
As a life coach.
Well, at that point in my life, I was just starting. It was actually the day after my father's funeral. I looked at my husband. I said, I'm going now. I'm going to be trained as a life coach. I had been thinking about it for that 1.5 years when they were both ill, and so I hadn't had a lot of courses in it then. I was an occupational therapist, so I had a lot of the sciences, and I did have psychology and things like that. But you know, when you think about the word grace, so the Grace Trail is a non-religious. I believe that grace is available to anyone if they just open their heart and their minds to the possibility that grace could enter their life. It has no race. Grace has no race, no religion, no gender, and no age limits. There are kids 6 years old walking it and talking it. I just had coffee yesterday with a minister who lives near me in Plymouth, and she walks the trail with her whole extended family. I believe on Mother's Day they did. But she took her nephew there, who's 8, and she said, I wasn't sure he'd get it as we were walking it, and she was like, this kid got it. You know, he said, let me tell you about my biggest challenge. So, you know, I've come to believe that since it's based on questions, you know, that it's a language that anyone can speak or anyone can learn to speak.
You've talked about the trail and walking it with people, and I'm going to hold this up to the camera, but I'm not sure they can see it all, but it certainly is in the book.
Yes.
And it is a little diagram of the trail in Plymouth, correct? Would you describe it, please?
What happened was in 2012, so I used what I called the grace process for 12 years in my life coaching practice, and people liked it and used it. And then in 2012, when my son was in combat in Afghanistan, I found myself stumbling again. I found it so difficult, and with Facebook, and you could actually see them right over there in Afghanistan, and I just found it extremely difficult to go about my life thinking about, you know, someone I love so much in combat. And it was at that time that I read an article about the Appalachian Mountain Trail. And in the article, the question was asked, who's hiking the trail? And the answer was, it's a whole lot of vets walking off their war. And I thought that was like amazing. I was like, wow, where can I go to walk off my war? Because I'm not going to get to the Appalachian Mountain Trail, and I'm not going to get to the California Pacific Trail like Reese Witherspoon. And I needed something more local. And I said to myself, why don't I just make my own trail? And, you know, I consider all of this grace, because grace is a gift that you receive that you don't ask for, you don't deserve, you can't buy it, you can't pay it back. Well, the fact that I heard those 5 words, to me, was a gift. And the fact that I noticed it, remembered, and used it was a gift. So anyway, I decided to take the 5 words of grace and to put them on a trail near my home in Plymouth. So I went down to the beach, I picked up some big granite stones, and I wrote gratitude on one, what are you grateful for, and I put it on the trail. And it's a 1-mile loop that you can walk, and so you'll find gratitude stone, you'll find a release stone, and I put the release stone on a rocky beach so that when people get there, they can picture yourself picking a stone up
yeah.
and saying to yourself, I know what I need to let go of, I know what it is to release, and then throwing that stone into the harbor. It's a great sense of release to actually just do that. I tried to place the stones in places that people could feel the energy of grace. And the accept stone I put in the middle of a beautiful field. And I call it the field of loving awareness, because when you walk through this field in June, right now, it's mowed, there's a path mowed, and the grass is almost 3 feet high on each side with all the rain we're having. So it's spectacular. You walk through this field and you ask yourself, what do I need to accept in my life? And
I have to say,
yes?
when I started reading the book, I was like probably skeptical. You know,
Yeah.
is this going to work for
Yeah.
me? And I've done other kinds of mindfulness work, and
Yeah.
I thought, well, yeah, this sounds familiar. But by the end of the afternoon, I was walking around my house, and I was saying, okay, what do I have to be grateful for? What do I have to be grateful for? It's a very straightforward idea.
Yeah.
And once you get it in your head, it kind of grows on you.
Yeah.
It's like a practice.
Yeah.
It's a practice. I mean, you call it a resiliency model.
It is a resiliency model.
Is that
yes.
a technical term?
Well, that's a coach. I'm a life coach.
Yeah.
So I have to call it something in that world.
In the
You know,
jargon,
most people
yeah.
don't really care that it's a resiliency model because it works. They just
Yeah,
care
yeah.
that it's simple.
Yeah.
They can remember it.
Yeah.
They can actually involve their family in it. You know, asking the questions with friends and
Yeah.
like you do with just yourself.
Yeah.
So I call it a resiliency model because life's hard. Time is speeding. You and I were talking about that. And no one's exempt from challenges. We all have challenges. And we get knocked down, and we got to get back up again. And I love to say that the 5 questions of the Grace Trail are a great way to get yourself back up on your feet. I hear that over and over again from people who have been dealt, I like to say they're in clubs they never wanted to be in. You know?
Yeah, that's a good one,
We all
too.
have a few of those. And I think that Grace Trail is a universal language. It's 5 time-tested, you know, concepts. I certainly didn't make up gratitude or release.
Right,
You know,
right,
they were
right.
there waiting to be found.
Do you find that people have trouble releasing or accepting? I mean, like if you say, okay, tell me what you need to release, like as a life coach, you
Yeah.
might say that. Do you
Yeah.
find that people
Well,
are
what I've-
reluctant to
I think it's a
delve
hard,
into that?
Yeah, I think that the Grace Trail is built on 3 things. It's built on curiosity, and that's the questions. It's built on compassion, which means there's no criticism, no judgment. Wherever you are is fine. And the last thing it's built on is courage. I always say to people, you got to bring the courage.
Yeah.
And you know, when you ask a question or you ask yourself the question, what do I need to release? It's not often pretty. You know, those are the things that aren't as much fun. And that's why I'm glad that the Grace Trail starts with gratitude, because it fills your body with good feelings and positivity, and it gets you ready, feeling a little more safe and comfortable to answer the next couple of questions that can be difficult for people. But I find the more people ask the questions, the easier it gets to answer. And I also tell people that if you want to pass and not answer a question in my presence or whatever, then today is not the day to answer it, and that's just fine.
Yeah. Describe how you organized the book. I found it very useful in that you have description of the process.
Yeah.
There are a lot of tips, but each chapter has a anecdotal portion where
right.
you describe things that people have told
Yep.
you about what they can release, and then you have some language.
Yeah.
I'm leading you.
Yeah,
Can you
that's
talk
okay.
about
Okay,
that?
sure.
Yeah, or I can,
tried
I
in
can
every-
tell you
yeah.
what I remember.
I'm really impressed. I can tell that you did your homework.
Yeah.
I tried in every single chapter to begin with what the definition of gratitude, release, accept, challenge, and embrace, what the traditional definition was. I also tried to use the language that you may hear. Like I tried to think of different G's for gratitude. One is just plain old gratitude, grace, be gracious, gracias. How do you generate more? How do you garner the best from things? So I tried to give people language that was the language of gratitude. And I did that for every letter to make it an easy conversation, because Grace Trail is actually a simple conversation to enter into so that you can start to talk to about what matters most to you. So I thought if I broke it down and gave simple language, people, like you can't say to your kids, so tell me, what are you grateful for? You know, you're going to get the eye roll. So, you know, to a child, you may want to use different gratitude language, and that may be something like, I used to say to my kids, did you laugh today? Did anything inspire you? You know, there's all different types of ways to enter conversation around Grace Trail. And a really important part of the Grace Trail is I collect stories. People send me stories now from all over the world. I actually have a woman in Egypt who wants to bring the Grace Trail to the Middle East.
That's
I mean,
great.
that in itself
Yeah.
is an amazing story. This is a young woman who came with her family to the United States in 2010. Her husband was going to school, and she became a coach, went back to Egypt, and reached out to me when she heard about the book. And this is a young mom in Egypt who's working full-time in a bank.
Wow.
Again, you know, what a story. Young children at home, and she coaches women in Egypt in her life coaching practice after she finishes at the bank. And, you know, what a wonderful story for us in the United States to hear, because we don't hear those stories,
Right,
you know, about
right.
Egypt.
It's
so
great to
it's great.
get feedback from all over
It
the
is
world.
all over the world.
That's really interesting.
Yes.
I wanted to mention that in each chapter you have these sections called switchbacks,
Right.
which are the things that you can actually do to practice
Right.
that particular thing.
Right.
What are some of your
Well,
favorites?
I love the whole term about a switchback, because a switchback on a trail is developed. You'll picture them in your mind if you've hiked. It goes diagonally across very steep grades.
Right.
And they do that to save the side of the hill or the side of the mountain, because if the same people climb up all the time, you have erosion, you get ruts. When it rains, there's all kinds of, you know, rock sliding. So a switchback is to change your path a bit and not go up the same old rut. So I love to use that term in the Grace Trail book, and I gave people switchbacks so that at the end of each one, it was a way to get you out of your own way, an interesting way to access the energy of each step. So people say to me, like, say I'm on a radio show and I'm at home, and maybe I'm on the phone for it, or even there are TV shows now that do Skype and things. People say, how do you get ready for it? And I say, well, that's my challenge. So one of my switchbacks, before I go on like a radio show or a TV show, you actually walked in, I'll stretch. At home, I jump rope. I do anything, because for the challenge step, you need energy.
Yeah,
You need to
yeah,
be
yeah.
invigorated. And so we can talk about that, and that's kind of boring. Or we can go do that and, you know, jog around, do a little yoga, and that helps me to take on my challenges. So I have all different kinds of switchbacks. Did you have any favorite ones?
Oh, I have a bunch of them. Oh, here's one. Okay, right in front of me. This is in the acceptance chapter. Acknowledge yourself. Identify one thing you did right today. Yay.
Yay. Yeah.
Maybe it is something big that you would like to congratulate yourself for.
Yep.
Say what needs to be said and what you were yearning to hear. You deserve it. Access the nutrients that feed your desire to do better.
Do you love it?
You like that one?
I love it.
Yeah, well, self-acknowledgement is something that I think we all need to work on. You have a chapter on, or section on fear.
Yes.
Fear of failure.
Yeah.
I also have spent some time thinking about fear of success.
Oh, yeah.
That's another
Oh, yeah.
thing.
It's huge.
Yeah.
What
yeah,
happens if I
Oh
succeed?
my God, will I be?
Yeah.
will they find out, the imposter?
Right,
But-
am I a fraud? Am I
Yeah,
good enough? Am I smart enough?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that leads me to another question about being a life coach.
Yes.
What is a life coach, and how do you prepare to be one? And
Well, back in 2000, I went to school and I went at the Coaches Training Institute. It's in California, but they fly out and they have sort of satellite programs. It took me about a year and a half, and they have 4 to 6 core courses. They'd come out and for 3 or 4 days. We'd sit in a room and we'd just work on it. And it was one of the best things I ever did in my life. I just felt like that was a club I really wanted to be in. And so after I finished training as a life coach, I then went into a year and a half certification program. And the International Coach Federation, which I'm also a member of, certifies you to say, yes, she's taken her educational courses, and then you have to coach a certain amount of clients. You have to be supervised during that, and then at the end they certify you that, you know, we think you're ready to go and coach people. Yeah, it was
pretty formal.
It was
Yeah.
very formal,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And so for 17 years, I've been practicing as a life coach. I consider it a privilege. I love it. And the fact that I can work with people to help them identify sometimes where they are, because that's not always clear, right? Where we actually are, what their strengths are, what sparks their enthusiasm, what makes them feel alive, help them get more of that, and move in a direction of their choice. That's what a really good life coach does.
Do you specialize, or do life coaches specialize in an age group or a gender, or?
The coaching profession now is specializing in everything. You can find a coach for just about anything. I consider myself a good old life coach. I am not veering from that, because my theory is every coach in the world, you've got to be a good life coach, because you're trying to get people to bring their life to work. If you're an executive coach, it's all about who's showing up in life. And that all is about life coaching. And all of the different niches in coaching, it all comes back to different terms, different specialties, but it really comes down to living your best, boldest, and most courageous life. So, you know, I believe coaches are agents of hope. No matter what kind of coach you are, people come to you because they want a plan for a desired future.
Is there a website or a way to find coaches? You mentioned the International
Coach Federation.
Okay.
You can just Google that. And if you're local, the International Coach Federation of New England has a whole local coach directory with all the specialties. You can go on there and look at it. And if you're interested in learning more about Grace Trail, you can go to www.gracetrail.com.
Right.
I'm also on Facebook. But don't just go to Grace Trail, because there's someone whose name is Grace Trail.
Okay.
Can you imagine?
That's
so
hard.
It's Grace Trail by Ann Jolis.
Yeah.
And people can find out all the events that are going on. And just generally, it's a very active community. There's a lot of wonderful participation, and there's always something new on the Grace Trail.
Yep. Tell me a little bit about your writing your book and deciding to publish it, and how to publish it. Since this is the Cape Cod Writers Center, we talk
Right.
to authors who have published their own books, who
Yes.
have gone to publishers at different stages who give different kinds of help, and then there are traditional publishers and online-only publishers. It's a big subject.
And
so
it's changing.
Yeah.
It's changing so fast. When I published my first book in 2009, which was a collection of Grace questions, it wasn't the Trail yet, so it was called Rise and Shine Anytime, and it was a collection I did as self-published back then. But when I wrote this book, the Grace Trail book, I actually went out to Jack Canfield had a retreat in his home, and I went out there for a 3-day retreat. And I had all the ideas for Grace Trail, all the ideas for workshops, the trail, writing a book, but I didn't want to do one thing until I met Jack Canfield, and the purpose of the retreat was for him to listen to ideas. It was sort of like a Shark Tank for authors. And it's also with the Quantum Leap program with Bradley Communications, that they get this all together. And the day I left Jack Canfield's, I turned into a hermit. I went home, and I knew I had to write my book. So I started in March of 2015. I literally wanted it done by December 1st. Now, I had worked on that for 12 years.
You had a lot of
15
material.
Years, I had a lot of content.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I
yeah.
really said no to lots of things in my life and dedicated myself to writing the book daily. And I did get it done between March and December 1st.
Good
but
for
it was
you.
a tremendous amount of perseverance, dedication, and courage. And insanity. It was a little bit
Insanity.
insane.
Well, we had a Cape Cod Writers Center meeting on time management.
Okay.
And most people will say, the people who have gotten published, is that they put the time aside
Yes.
every day,
Every day.
religiously. They develop a schedule,
That's
and
right.
that's what they do.
Yes.
So then you published this through
I self-published
You
it.
self-published
Yes.
it.
And so
and that is working out?
It's worked out really nicely, yes. What I did was I discovered a whole network, and again, the Quantum Leap program, which I actually work for. It's a marketing program for authors and people who are developing things. But they helped me to find, there's a whole culture out there of working parents who have left the large publishing houses and who are fabulous editors, graphic designers, cover designers, amazing people that helped me to put this book together. And we pieced it together. I work with an amazing virtual assistant who helps with all my marketing. And as a self-published author, it's very challenging to get into independent bookstores, or I'm in Barnes & Noble, at least in their computer system. And it's a lot of work, but I'm hearing from authors that have publishers that it's a lot of work anyway.
It's a lot of work, right?
Yeah,
right.
it is. So writing the book is one thing, and then marketing it and promoting it is another. But I want to say to all your authors,
Yes.
in 2009, when I wrote my first book and I went to my first marketing retreat, I was too nervous to stand up and introduce myself.
Oh, goodness. Well, now you're on
I've got-
TEDx.
I did a
and
TEDx, yes.
I want to encourage everyone to go to
It-
your website,
You
Grace
can go to my
Trail.
website. You can just go to YouTube.
Go to
and you
YouTube.
can search TEDx or cracking. I called it Cracking the Grace Code.
Cracking the
And
Grace
so I did
Code.
a TEDx Women down in Wilmington, Delaware last October. And I'm happy to say almost 5,000 people have viewed it. I'm getting
Yes,
great
I saw
feedback
that.
on it.
5,000. I was quite impressed.
Yes.
Well, we're going to have to wrap up. Thank you
Okay.
for coming.
It's been a
I'm
pleasure.
gonna walk the Grace Trail someday.
I
and
hope. I hope you
will like
do.
to get. It's in Plymouth. Thank you so much
Thanks
for coming.
so much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Take care.